Fires and anger burn on in Los Angeles, the city convulsing from the outcome of the police beating trial. Atlanta also feels the fury in an outburst of clashes and destruction.
This is CNN's Prime News, taking the time to examine world events, issues, and newsmakers, with Bernard Shaw in Washington and Susan Rook in Atlanta.
A full day after the verdict that ignited the city's rage, Los Angeles still is being ripped apart by violence and chaos. Throngs of people brazenly looted stores in broad daylight. Angry mobs roamed the streets, venting their outrage over the not guilty verdicts for the police officers who beat Rodney King. The LA County coroner confirms 16 people have been killed, more than 400 injured, and some 300 arrested since the riots erupted last night. The mostly black South Central section of the city was hit the hardest. Arsonists torched hundreds of buildings, mostly businesses. The LA County Fire Department estimates at least 35 blazes are still raging. LA County reports a fireman was shot about 2 hours ago. A dusk to dawn curfew has been imposed for all of Los Angeles, beginning in about an hour and a half from now. Thousands of businesses and schools are closed. The sale of ammunition and gasoline restricted. Nighttime sporting events also canceled. Mayor Tom Bradley spoke about the crisis just a short while ago.
This is a sad commentary on the young people who were involved. It's a sad commentary on our society when young people feel that that's the way they have to express their anger. I'm here to tell them that it's not the kind of conduct that is acceptable in this city. And we will do everything within our power, one, to gain control of the streets and the neighborhoods of this city, to root out, to arrest, to incarcerate where necessary those who are engaged in this kind of illegal activity.
Some 2,000 National Guard troops moved into the streets today to reinforce police and hundreds of California Highway Patrol officers. And Governor Pete Wilson has called up another 2,000 Guard members.
Early damage estimates in Los Angeles are reaching at least $100 million, and they could go higher. Much of the damage is in South Central Los Angeles. Residents of the area are no strangers to violence, but the rioting there is making life especially difficult. CNN's Don Knapp.
Police chased out looters from the Crenshaw Town Center Thursday morning, but by then most of the merchandise and the jobs were gone.
I know I'm gonna lose a job. But they don't rebuild, but it's hard to find jobs.
Some of these thrifty drugstore workers escaped out the back door as vandals broke in the front door Wednesday night. There was little left when they returned to the store Thursday morning.
This is their livelihood. This is how they support their families. What do they do now? What do I tell them now?
I got a family to feed, house payments, and my husband's job also got burned down, so I don't know. It's really bad.
Beatrice Enriquez and her family survived the night.
They stepped out the car and they just started shooting, and all the kids were out here.
But daylight brought other problems.
Food, we got no food nowhere around here. All the grocery stores are completely ruined, completely ruined.
Practically every resident of South Central Los Angeles is feeling the effects of the violence. Even those who live in quiet neighborhoods like this, at some distance from the fires and shootings. The people of this neighborhood worry violence could strike here next.
My child couldn't even go to work this morning. She works downtown L.A. There was no safe way that she could go to work this morning. Why? Because she's light-skinned. She said, Mom, I don't be pulled out of my car.
I have absolutely no idea how they're going to stop this, though. They don't have enough police. They're not arresting people. People are stealing things right in front of the police officers.
But Herman Green says he survived the Watts riot, and they were worse than this.
I'm not scared. I'm black, and I don't think they're going to bother me, but you never know.
Monique Bryant says she'll use her gun if she has to get to work safely. She's an officer with the Youth Authority.
They snatched some people out of their cars and beat them and stoned them and threw bottles at them.
Not going to happen to you?
I hope not. I really hope not.
People here aren't sure where it will end. But there is some confidence that eventually it will.
We'll see. Time is just going to give us the answers.
Don Knapp, CNN, Los Angeles.
There has been trouble in Atlanta because of the Los Angeles police verdict. It started during an afternoon protest by university students. Groups of rowdy young people went on a rampage in the streets of downtown Atlanta. CNN crews captured some of the random acts of violence and the police reaction.
And you giving it to them. We can't walk down there. About Rodney King.
Look at him treating like an animal. I didn't talk about it.
Atlanta police report 17 people were hurt seriously enough to require hospital treatment. Officials say no one has died. 100 people were arrested today in Atlanta. A little later, we'll have more on the nationwide reaction to the events in Los Angeles. Just ahead, local and national leaders speak out about the violence and try to find the right words to stop it.
California Governor Pete Wilson is speaking about the reaction to the verdict in the Rodney King case. Let's listen.
The words of a young black woman spoken by her in angry and anguished protest after she had watched the looting of her neighborhood store. That's our store. We use that store. She seemed near tears as she described with disbelief the people who drag motorists from their cars and brutally kicked and beat them. Why, she asked, hurt people who haven't hurt us? This young woman, her voice choked with emotion and frustration, was expressing my own views exactly. How wrong and how senseless to loot the neighborhood store and to torch the neighborhood. How wrong and how senseless to destroy jobs in a time and place where honest people are hungering for jobs. How wrong and how senseless and how truly shameful to kick and beat an innocent passerby for no other reason than the color of his skin. The looters, the arsonists, the thugs engaged in this violence are a tiny fraction of the city's population. The vast majority, like this articulate young woman, are victims of this violence and hate, and they reject it. They recognize full well, as did Martin Luther King a quarter century ago, that violence is a fatal flaw. It's not justice, and it's not a solution to anything. Dr. King said it well, I quote, "The ultimate weakness of violence is that it is a descending spiral, begetting the very thing it seeks to destroy. Instead of diminishing evil, it multiplies it." Well, Dr. King was right. Violence is lawlessness. Justice Thurgood Marshall, the first black member of the United States Supreme Court, told a black audience in St. Louis in 1966, quote, "Lawlessness is lawlessness. Anarchy is anarchy. Neither race, nor color, nor frustration is an excuse for either lawlessness or anarchy." Justice Marshall said it with unmistakable clarity. Lawlessness cannot be justified on any ground. I was stunned by the verdict in the Rodney King case. I didn't sit in the jury box, so I haven't seen or heard the evidence. I only saw the videotape a dozen times, and I was sickened by what I saw then and what I saw in the TV coverage of Los Angeles since the verdict. Justice Marshall was right. Lawlessness is lawlessness, and it is inexcusable. There can be no excusing excessive force by a police officer. There can be no excusing arson, theft, or deadly assault by a citizen. We are not going to tolerate either in California. We are not going to suffer violence or lawlessness or anarchy. We will insist upon the rule of law. I commend the U.S. Department of Justice for investigating the use of excessive force by the 4 officers, and I insist that anyone who does violence to innocent citizens or to property in California be arrested and prosecuted to the full extent of the law. As I speak, 2,000 California National Guardsmen and 750 California Highway Patrol officers are being deployed with Los Angeles County Sheriffs and Los Angeles Police Department units to assist in their efforts to arrest violators and to restore order. One final word. As there is no place in California for violence or lawlessness, so there can be no place for racism. Not for racism of any kind. It represents the worst in human nature. It is sick and it is ugly. It breeds mindless injustice. I am ashamed of those whom I watched on television, looting, breaking the law, and presenting to the world a picture that is not the Los Angeles of the decent multitudes of all races, but instead a different Los Angeles, an ugly place of distorted values inhabited by a lawless minority of all races. The real and lasting values of the decent multitudes must prevail. The values of Dr. King and Justice Marshall and that young woman protesting the senseless destruction of her neighborhood. It will require courage on the part of the decent multitude to prevail over the racists and the lawless. It will require the kind of courage exhibited by the black man who risked his life defying an angry mob to escort a motorist to safety. When interviewed on television, this Good Samaritan was asked why he had intervened to help the white motorist. He said simply that this wasn't a racial issue, but instead an issue of basic humanity. Well, that man of courage speaks for all people of goodwill and courage in all of Los Angeles and all of California. He speaks for the Los Angeles and for the California that we must all insist upon. I'd be happy to take your questions.
You have been listening to a live statement by California Governor Pete Wilson condemning the violence in Los Angeles, calling it wrong and senseless. He said, "We will enforce the rule of law." Bernie?
CNN's Greg Lamont has followed the trial of the 4 police officers and now its aftermath. He joins us live from Los Angeles with an update on what's happening there. Greg?
Well, Los Angeles is a city under siege, and police seem powerless to do anything about it. There are too many looters, there are too many arsonists, and too few policemen to stop it. In fact, police stand helplessly by as they watch hundreds of looters move in and out of stores. They bash their way into the stores and they take what they want. The looting is sporadic, but it is citywide. Hollywood and Beverly Hills have been affected today. 3 major banks have closed down out of fear of robbery. Most stores have closed in the downtown area, but looters just crash through the iron gates and the glass and do it with no fear of being caught. In fact, the police, when they do see it, can only try to scare them away. Given the level of crime here today, only a handful of people have been arrested, 100 or so. because the police are simply too busy trying to contain certain areas. They're not trying to make arrests. The stores that are looted, it's almost like a feeding frenzy goes on. They pour in, grab, run out, and they get what they want. There's been sporadic gunfire throughout the day today as well. The city at this point reminds me of Kuwait hours after the Iraqis pulled out. There's thick black smoke everywhere from hundreds of fires that have been set. The skies are dark where we are because of 2 fires in the immediate area. It seems that to smash windows, loot, and then the idea is to set the place on fire for no apparent reason. There has been millions upon millions of dollars in damage. People are losing their businesses, others are losing their jobs, and watching all of this going on with a city that is seemingly helpless is sickening. The National Guard is set to hit the streets. In fact, they have just arrived in our neighborhood, but it seems as each hour passes, the strength of the masses continues to grow. People realize that they can get what they want, so they do. As one person told us, he said, "I didn't smash the windows, but somebody else did. I saw an opportunity to get what I wanted, so I did." And that seems to be the scene throughout Los Angeles today. Hundreds of people running down the streets in waves, smashing windows, and getting what they want. Bernie?
CNN's Greg Lamont in Los Angeles. Our live coverage will continue in a moment.
Updating our lead story, the LA County coroner now confirms 16 deaths in the wave of violence gripping Los Angeles. Angry mobs roamed the streets today, in some cases attacking people in their cars. More than 400 people are injured, some 300 arrested since the riots erupted last night. A dusk to dawn curfew is due to begin in a little more than an hour from now. Fires raged throughout the day. Looters pillaged stores in broad daylight. 2,000 National Guard troops are being deployed to try to restore order. Another 2,000 are on the way. The violence was sparked by the not guilty verdicts for the police officers who beat motorist Rodney King. A juror who asked to remain anonymous spoke with CNN's Bobby Batista about the jury's decision.
The policemen just were not guilty of any abuse in our mind. They did simply what they were trained for, using the tools that are given to them, and based on Rodney King's actions. He's the one that was controlling the action all the way through.
Could I ask you what you mean by controlling the action?
He had 2 companions in the car with him, and when he finally did stop, after a long pursuit, the other 2 occupants got out of the vehicle and were searched and handcuffed and put into vehicles to be taken for booking. While Rodney King tended to frolic around and make jokes apparently with everything and be very combative, and I feel that the police did only what they had to do in order to get him under control under extreme conditions.
Could I ask you how important the videotape was in your decision?
It was important in a positive and a negative fashion, both. So it was just another piece of evidence that we had to look at. It's the parts that are shown repeatedly on the television are the parts that appear to be most violent. They show a limited amount of activity by Mr. King, that he was in total control all the way. When he decided to be handcuffed, to be arrested, he simply put his hands behind his head and the arresting was completed. Until that time, he continued to make motions to get away, to escape. He kicked at the officers, etc. So there was nothing else the officers could do, in our opinion.
The whole issue of racism has now become really the core of this whole incident. Did that come up at all in your discussions, deliberations?
It was introduced minimally in the open court by one of the prosecuting attorneys, and it was discussed in that vein with the evidence we were presented with within the jury deliberation room. It was not a racist issue. Had it been a matter of a bunch of white policemen out to get a bunch of black men, they would have indeed done, excuse me, done damage to all three of the car's occupants, not just one of them. So no, racism was not a part of the issue in spite of the difficulties that are going on in the Los Angeles area right now.
Even before the verdict, Los Angeles Police Chief Gerald Gates was criticized for preparing for unrest in the event 4 of his officers were acquitted. But when the rioting began, where were the police and firefighters? That was one of the questions today asked throughout Los Angeles. CNN's Dan Blackburn reports.
This was the all-too-common scene in parts of this beleaguered city. Looters smashing shop windows and stealing the contents with virtually no concern about whether police would arrive to stop them, because often they didn't. At City Hall, Chief Gates admitted his forces had more than they could handle, trying to stand guard for firefighters and shop owners.
It was simply impractical to do either until the firefighters were protected, and impractical for the officers to take people into custody when they were simply overwhelmed.
And on the streets, officers themselves differed over what to do.
All you have to do, sir, listen up! And they run. I understand that. You listen to me, okay?
Firefighters, too, found themselves stretched too thin. As new fires broke out near Hollywood, residents complained that it took too long for the firemen to arrive.
I told the 911 people that there's a big fire going on South New Hampshire Street. And you know, they said, thank you, and they just kept it down. And the people, they came after 20 minutes.
I beat the fire truck from over here. So in my opinion, the response was ridiculously slow. It didn't make any sense.
And people who gathered to watch often engaged in their own heated exchanges.
We are out here to revolutionize. We are showing something. We're showing something. We're showing that we are angry. We are frustrated. We're not going to sit on our asses and take it anymore.
Back at City Hall, some blamed the news media.
When are you going to assume your responsibility as well, and you haven't hyped this thing right up until the day, D-Day?
And others worried about the longer-term implications.
We have yet to fully recuperate, that is, from an economic vantage point, from the crisis in 1965. And here we are with a situation that is in some ways more disastrous.
While some recent, newer citizens expressed dismay at what they were witnessing.
I think it's stupid, I think it's ridiculous, and I think people have, probably it's too much democracy, too much freedom, and the people don't know what to do with it.
I think it's outrageous. I mean, for any civilized human being, this kind of thing should never, ever happen.
Meanwhile, firemen continued to battle flames, and police chased looters. But for both, it often was a case of playing catch-up.
Many on these streets believe the outnumbered police and firefighters will continue to be overwhelmed for some time to come. And the finger-pointing is likely to go on for much longer. Dan Blackburn, CNN, Los Angeles.
And our coverage will continue right after this. Under normal circumstances, the Rodney King case would have been a local story, reported then perhaps forgotten. But the videotape of his beating quickly transformed it into a national, even international story. CNN's Mark Leff has nationwide reaction to the verdicts.
Around the country, people are angry, marching on state capitals in Georgia and in Idaho in the first few hours after the acquittal in California. In some places, people did more than march. There was trouble on the streets of Atlanta Thursday afternoon. Crowds attacked people and property in the city's main commercial district. The trouble began not long after a peaceful prayer rally at the tomb of civil rights leader Martin Luther King, Jr.
Well, not only are we here today to stop the killing in Los Angeles and stop the killing in the suites, we must stop the killing in our own community.
Somebody broke into a police garage in Wisconsin, damaged nearly 36 police cars, and left a note linking the action to the Los Angeles verdict. The bells at the Church of St. John the Divine in New York rang to demonstrate what church officials called solidarity with the people of Los Angeles, while a city councilman whose father represented Harlem in Congress condemned the verdict.
It makes you hate this country, the United States of America. It makes you hate that flag. It makes you hate cops, and it makes you hate all white people who can even think of beginning to excuse this verdict.
Joining Powell and other community leaders, a woman who says her son was choked to death last year as New York City police tried to subdue him.
It's injustice for all of us, you know, people of color. And I wonder, is it ever going to change? We're tired. We really are tired of this, and we can't take no more.
Say what?
There is anger, too, in Minneapolis.
As for that lie, there's only a minority of police whooping our heads. That's a damn lie. That's a damn lie. The minority is the few that don't whoop our heads.
And at the National Black Police Association convention in Atlanta,
beware, because you're going to see police officers drawing guns and fighting other officers now. Because we are not going to accept the verdict as it came down.
demonstrators blocked traffic on the top deck of the San Francisco-Oakland Bay Bridge. Around the country, many people are looking at the not guilty verdicts in Los Angeles and asking why. And a few are using the same event to ask, why not? Mark Leff, CNN, reporting.
Our coverage will continue in a moment. Updating this day's top story, violent outbursts in parts of Los Angeles following acquittals for 4 white LA police officers accused of beating motorist Rodney King. 16 people have died, 400 injured in riots and looting. A state of emergency has been declared, and a dusk to dawn curfew will soon be in effect. 2,000 National Guard troops have been deployed. Another 2,000 are being called up. At least 300 people have been arrested so far in Los Angeles. Civil rights leaders around the country condemn the verdict, but call for restraint. From Los Angeles streets, here are some reactions to the verdict and the violence.
It ain't all about race. It ain't all about the color. What it's about, we not being treated right.
They don't even have enough of police out here to do what they have to do. And all these people around here, we're overpowering them.
President Bush has ordered an accelerated federal investigation of the Los Angeles police beating case for possible civil rights violations. His Attorney General spent several hours today in White House consultations on the issue. CNN's Anthony Collins reports.
The police beating of Rodney King could lead the Bush administration to make a federal case out of it. The president has ordered his Attorney General to speed up an investigation.
What we are looking at is whether there was intentional infliction of excessive force, which may constitute a violation of the civil rights laws.
Federal civil rights laws provide up to 10 years in prison and a $10,000 fine for conspiracy to deprive a person of his civil rights. Associate Attorney General Wayne Budd, the Justice Department's number 3 official, heads the new investigation.
With regard to the Rodney King matter, the jury verdict yesterday is not the last step.
Budd and a team of prosecutors will review the state trial before deciding whether to indict the police on federal charges. The FBI will investigate again, as it did before it was interrupted by the state prosecution.
We had conducted and completed our preliminary investigation. At that point, it was stopped, and subject to the oversight of the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division, we will begin again.
Among precedents for federal investigations in the past was the 1964 murder of 3 civil rights workers in Mississippi. A sheriff and a deputy were convicted of conspiring to violate their civil rights. The incident formed the basis for the film Mississippi Burning. Among more recent cases, in Oakland, California last year, 4 housing authority police were indicted on federal civil rights conspiracy charges.
Since October '88, we in the Department of Justice have brought charges against 123 law enforcement officers for police brutality. That includes officers in, I believe, 23 jurisdictions. Our conviction rate is running approximately 75%.
The Justice Department is under political pressure to move fast in the Rodney King case.
We demand some swift action and some effective action.
Mayor Tom Bradley of Los Angeles praised the president and his attorney general for reactivating the federal investigation. But whether the new legal moves will be enough to help defuse the situation on the streets is still far from certain. Anthony Collins, CNN, at the Justice Department.
President Bush is condemning the rioting without publicly criticizing the verdict in the police beating trial. A senior administration official who doesn't want his name to be used says The president was as astounded as anyone else at the verdict, but the official says the president doesn't want to taint possible federal prosecution of the officers. The official says Mr. Bush also doesn't want to stir up emotions. Earlier today, the president called for calm.
We are concerned about any question of excessive police violence, and we are equally concerned about excessive public violence. The murder and destruction in the streets of Los Angeles last night and today must be stopped. Lootings, beatings, and random violence against innocent victims must be condemned, and society cannot tolerate this kind of behavior.
On Capitol Hill, some lawmakers were more disposed to criticize the verdict from Simi Valley. Senator Bill Bradley of New Jersey noted that the videotape shows Rodney King being hit 56 times in 81 seconds. Bradley then proceeded to give fellow lawmakers a blow-by-blow account of the beating.
56 times in 81 seconds. Something like this. Boom, pow, 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 pow. 56 times in 81 seconds. That's what the American public saw on videotape.
Also on Capitol Hill, Senator Arlen Specter of Pennsylvania suggested the Senate Judiciary Committee hold hearings on the question of police brutality.
The presidential contenders condemned the violence in Los Angeles. First, Governor Bill Clinton.
We should say to our fellow Americans in Los Angeles, no matter how angry you are, no matter how aggrieved you are, stop the violence and stop it now. The verdict in the King trial is not an excuse to burn or steal or maim or kill. It is wrong.
Earlier, Clinton reacted to the verdicts by charging President Bush has fallen short in dealing with the nation's underlying racial tensions. Well, that prompted White House Press Secretary Marlin Fitzwater to accuse the man he called Slippery Bill of treating the situation as a political opportunity. Meanwhile, potential candidate H. Ross Perot issued this statement. I'm disappointed by the verdicts in Los Angeles. The burning and killing in the streets is also a tragedy because it further divides and weakens our country. We must unite to solve our problems. If we fight with one another, we all lose. The federal government must take legal action immediately to demonstrate that justice will be done. And former California Governor Jerry Brown also denounced the verdicts and headed to California, saying he wanted to, quote, cool down emotions.
We will take a break. Prime News continues right after this. Earlier this evening, CNN's Catherine Cryer spoke with attorneys for two of the Los Angeles police officers in the Rodney King case. They discussed a section of the videotape beating many of us haven't seen. Attorney Michael Stone explains that at the beginning of the tape, King has been hooked up to a taser. A taser fires crippling volts of electricity that cause complete contractions of the body.
My belief is, what I suggested to the jury, is that Mr. King's fall is occasioned by another activation of the taser rather than any particular blow.
All right, we'll back the tape up to that point and take a look at what you're talking about. And you said the reason he hit the ground was what?
Well, I think it was the reactivation of the taser. You'll notice that there is no protective reflexes in Mr. King's body movement as he falls. Now, if he was knocked in the head with a baton with such force that it would cause that kind of a fall, he would have some evidence of that kind of a blow to the head. He does not. The medical evidence does not show any such injury. It's much more...
Well, let me interrupt. There is motion that we're seeing at this point in time, obviously on the part of an officer with his back to the camera.
Correct.
At this point in time. So it looks like strikes, in fact, are being leveled against Mr. King.
Okay. Well, the evidence was that it was not a full stroke of the baton. It was a what has been referred to as a check swing, or it was a step to the side as Mr. King came forward to the officer. There is no evidence that is at least backed up by two witnesses that say the same thing, that Mr. King was struck in any particular place with the baton at that point.
Let me bring
just a second. I don't think you can see the tip of the baton. I don't think you can see the baton moving. You see what you think is a strike, but I don't think in that first blow, if there is a blow, that you actually see the baton and where it strikes Mr. King. It was just a matter of speculation among the various witnesses.
But at this point in time, what we're seeing are certainly blows against his body, correct?
Oh, well, of course.
Absolutely.
Of course.
Mr. Munger, let me bring you in here for a moment. Let's stop the tape and ask you about police procedure at this point. You represented Sergeant Kuhn. He was the officer in charge. In terms of the procedure you explained to the jury, what was appropriate tactic at this point in time?
Well, and let me back up just at the beginning for just a second. What you were describing is absolutely correct from my perception. Mr. King was laying on the ground. He wasn't being touched. He got up and he charged by making a 180-degree turn into Officer Powell. And where that baton blow hit is really not important. The mere fact that he would get up, turn, and aggressively charge at Officer Powell set the tone for everything that happened out there. And you have to understand what had happened before this had occurred. He had thrown 4 policemen off. He had led them on a high-speed chase. Now I'll get to your question. What were they supposed to do? Police officers have a use of force scale or a use of force step. They have procedures that they are supposed to follow in regard to any use of force based upon what the suspect's actions are. They clearly followed that.
The attorneys have said their strategy of emphasizing King's actions rather than their clients is one of the reasons the officers were acquitted.
We'll be back with more news in a moment, including the latest on a deadly accident at Chicago's O'Hare International Airport. We will update Los Angeles events in a moment. Meantime, economists say a slow and steady recovery may be underway as the government's chief economic forecasting gauge rose for the 3rd straight month. The index of leading economic indicators climbed 0.2% last month, although only 4 of the 11 indicators contributed to the rise. The Commerce Department reports orders for factory goods climbed 1.6% in March, and that is the sharpest increase since last October.
In Chicago, a 10-year-old child was killed today when a car plowed into a group of 3rd graders at O'Hare International Airport. Authorities say at least 67 other people were injured when a car driven by an 87-year-old man jumped a curb and struck the students. The children were out on a field trip to the airport. Police say the man has been taken into custody for questioning.
A report in the European newspaper raises new questions about the former Soviet republic's ability to control its nuclear weapons. The European says Iran now has at least 2 nuclear warheads that had been reporting missing from Kazakhstan. A 3rd missing nuclear warhead is believed to be in the Middle East. The European says its information comes from a secret report from the Russian Foreign Intelligence Agency.
The U.S. House of Representatives has voted to overturn the Bush administration's so-called gag rule at federally funded family planning clinics. The vote, 268 to 150. That's short of the 2/3 vote needed to override a threatened veto by President Bush. The new guidelines allow doctors to discuss abortion with women if there is a medical reason for the discussions. Other staffers, including nurses, can't discuss abortion.
A consumer group says television ads for the new nicotine patches are misleading and they should be pulled off the air. The product is being heavily touted as an aid to help smokers kick the habit. CNN medical correspondent Jeff Levine reports.
Habitrol. It's a patch. You know, the patch. Habitrol.
In what amounts to a media blitz, the three makers of nicotine patches are urging tobacco addicts to try their new product. Their target, the 15 million people a year in the U.S. who try to quit.
It would be like a pregnant woman's need for food, you know, when she's pregnant with a baby. And it's just you've got to have it.
But a consumer group is warning that the saturation campaign is more smoke than substance.
The purpose of all this is to maximize sales. Science, ethics, morality be damned. I think it is unethical and immoral to be running an advertising campaign like this.
Wolf says the commercials are misleading because they imply the patches alone are enough to help smokers conquer the habit. Studies show that the device is most effective when used in connection with a smoking cessation program. The makers do offer assistance to quitters, although critics say that's not enough. Public Citizen's other concern is that patch users will smoke while on the patch, which could cause a dangerous reaction.
It has significant health hazards. The only way we think that advertisements of any kind should be allowed to continue would be if they include a box warning.
The box would reinforce the need for additional help in quitting and warn of the potential nicotine hazard. And because of federal regulations would force the ads off the air. The Food and Drug Administration is considering the option, but spokesmen for the manufacturers of the patch insist their ads are responsible and don't make specific claims. The medication is only available with a prescription and presumably with a doctor's advice.
For most patients, some kind of help with the process is really essential. And I think even the data from the drug houses indicates that there is a very, very high relapse rate in someone who has just gone through the drill of the patch alone.
Meanwhile, consumers have already spent an estimated $300 million on the nicotine patches in the last 5 months. Titania Rodriguez was a 2-pack-a-day smoker until she put on the patch. It provides her with a continuous dose of nicotine through the skin to ease the craving.
Believe me, the patch gave me my life back and will cut down my risk for lung cancer.
Whatever Public Citizen's concerns, a spokesman for the Centers for Disease Control supports the ad's quit smoking message. He sees no need for a warning. Jeff Levine, CNN Medical News, Washington.
News from Medicine is brought to you by Bristol-Myers Squibb Company, makers of New Excedrin IB, the headache ibuprofen.
Updating our top story on Prime News in Los Angeles, the death toll from the 2 days of widespread violence now is up to 17 people. That according to the latest word from the county coroner's office. Buildings torched by arsonists still are ablaze in parts of the city. Authorities have restricted the sale of gasoline and ammunition. Thousands of businesses and schools are shut down, that for safety. Looting is rampant, spreading now to other parts of the city. This is the second day, as we said, of violence in reaction to the not guilty verdicts of the 4 white police officers who beat an unarmed motorist, Rodney King. 2,000 National Guard troops are moving into the streets to try to help police restore order. There are reports of some 300 arrests since the violence erupted last night. At a speech in Columbus a short while ago, President Bush again called for an end to the violence and asked for an end to racial intolerance and bigotry. We will, of course, keep you updated with the latest information. Thank you for joining us for Prime News. I'm Susan Rook at CNN Center in Atlanta. Good night, Bernie.
Good night, Susan. I'm Bernard Shaw in Washington. Now here's Larry King with a look at what's next on CNN. Larry?
Thanks, Bernie. What's next is a former Manhattan prosecutor who wants to be the district attorney in Los Angeles, the attorney for Rodney King, and a juror, and your phone calls. Next on Larry King Live. Don't go away.